Hi everyone, this is Guy. I wanted to walk you through some parts or the steps of your assignment for week 5 and give you a little more background on that. So here you see the website of the Big Cities Health Coalition, and this is where the data for this week's work came from. So this is real data. I downloaded it from here, and the Big Cities Health Coalition is the health departments in 500 big cities in the United States. So they pool their data to try and help improve healthcare and public health. So when you download the data, it comes down in a comma-separated values file, which is essentially a text file that has a comma at the separation of each data element in a record and a return for the end of the record. And when you open it in Excel, it automatically then fills in columns and rows like you see here. Now the original data set had 82,000 rows of data and about 15 columns, and so I cut that down quite a bit. But I still have in this data set 2,500 rows. So here we see the last data row is 2,500. So this is still a good sized data set, but it won't choke your computers, and we can send it and work with it pretty easily. So what you want to do with this is analyze it, and you're going to do that by doing some work with tables and with pivot tables. And so what I did to make this easier for you is I put the directions on the worksheet itself. So I'm going to bring that worksheet over so you can see it. And so now I cut down some of the columns that we didn't need, and we still have 2,500 rows, but then I put the directions here in column I. The problem is that as soon as you filter this and you're not showing this first row 2, you can't see these directions anymore. So what we want to do is click in the column heading to select the column, right click and do copy, and then go to File tab, click on New, click on Blank Workbook, and this is going to open a new blank workbook. And so right click in the top cell here and paste. So now you have the directions in a different workbook than what the data is in. So you can see what I'm doing is I'm changing the width of this. So I'm going to park it over here. So now with this on screen, I can scroll through the directions, and I can go back to the workbook that has the data in it. I'm going to make that one a little narrower. So I can have them both on screen at the same time. So that's what you should do. So now you can start, following these directions one at a time, and over here in the workbook, you actually do it. So the first thing is to make this a table, and I've already done that step. But if you click up here and select the entire workbook, that is a mistake. You do not want to do that. And the reason is that if you make the entire workbook into a table, you'll have a table with over 16,000 columns and 1 million plus rows, and that's not what you want. So what you want to do is click in the data, and if you go to the Home tab and do Format as a Table, Excel will look for the first empty column and end the table there, and it will go down and end it at the first empty row, and so that's what will define the table. So I've made the table for you here, and the next thing you're going to want to do is to select 2 cities that you'd like to compare. So these are your choice between any of the 500 cities that are in the data. So I'm going to click on the list arrow to go over the city list here. I'm going to click Select All to unselect, and then scroll through here and just pick 2 at random. And Click OK, and so now you'll just see those two cities data. We've filtered everything else out. And the next thing you can do is go over here and filter the measures. You could use the short question or the measure ID for that. So what happened, these cities all conducted surveys of their populations to find the incidence of these unhealthy behaviors. And they adjusted the data to fit the demographics of the city. So each city can be compared to the other ones in this data set because they've accounted for the different demographics of their populations. So we have the data value, which is the percent. And so if we go over here to the measures and we unclick, and then we just select two of those. So I'm going to select those two, lack of physical activity and obesity. Click OK. So now we see the numbers for those cities. So in Lakeland, the lack of physical activity was in 26% of the population, and in Warner Robins it was 26.9. So it was more of a problem in Warner Robins. If we look at obesity in Lakeland, Florida was 31.2%, and in Warner Robins it was 33.6%. So Warner Robins overall is not as healthy as Lakeland. So I'd like to have a chart, but it's kind of hard to make a chart when your data has the same thing, like Lakeland, listed more than one time. This is transaction data, and this is very common for what you get exported out of a health database of any kind. So since a regular table, it's hard to make a chart with this kind of arrangement. That's where we're going to use the pivot table. And so if I go to Insert and click Tables and do, I have one more thing to do. I've got to make sure that I'm clicked in the table data here. Let's do that first. Now we go to Pivot Tables and click on Recommended Pivot Tables. And there's going to be a whole bunch of those, but we'll just take the first one and click OK. And that's going to come up on a new sheet. So you see here's the city data, and then here's our new sheet that has the pivot table in it. And now you're going to want the space on your sheet. So I'm going to drag the left border here, and now you'll be able to just click and go back and forth between your directions for the pivot table and the actual pivot table. You need some space on the screen. And I want to change the table, so I'm going to click and drag state abbreviations out. And what I want to put in here is the measure in the rows. So that's going to put in the rows of our table each of these measures of unhealthy behavior. And then what I want over here in the columns is the city. So I'm going to drag city name over to the columns. And so now we have the cities. Now we filtered the table here, but the pivot table is using the entire data set. It's not filtered by what we did before when we had the regular table. So you'll see here that in the column labels there's an opportunity to use this list arrow and do what we did before, is to select just the cities we're interested in. So just in the interest of time, I'm going to pick two. They're not the same ones as before. But now we see the data for those two cities that I picked, Arlington and Auburn, in the pivot table. And so we can compare those just like you did before. Now something I want to point out while we're on this is that we have pivot table tab up here, and so one of the things on that is refresh. So if you were to add new rows to the data set or change any of the numbers in the data, that is not going to show up in your pivot table until you do a refresh. So you refresh all, and that updates any changes that might have been made in your data will update now in your pivot table. But on the same tab up here, the pivot table, there's a pivot chart tool, and so if we click on that, it's going to suggest a chart, and we'll take the suggestion and just click OK. So now we have a chart that is made from the data we selected. And what's really nice here is that the city name is over here with the list arrow, so we can alter this here. We can also do the measures, and we can do that, so we can get rid of the ones we don't want to see and just show the ones that we do care about. So this chart tool is really nice. What you want to do next is to copy this and put it into your Word document. So if you right click over in the white space, you can copy. If you click on something like one of the data elements, it won't copy the whole chart. It's only going to copy that data. So you want to click in the white space and then right click and do copy. And now I'm going to bring my Word document in, and so now I'm going to right click, and there's some paste options I want you to see. So if we do a link of data, you see that there's two of them here that say link data. There's two that say embed workbook. So if we link the data, so now it's going to put that chart into our Word document, and I've already used the references here to show where this data came from. So now your assignment is to write a few sentences, a paragraph here, explaining what you see here. So for instance, you could say that, well, between these two cities, Arlington has higher values both for lack of physical activity and obesity. Now you can't say why this is true, because we don't have that information. That's not in the data. All you can do is describe what is shown on here. You can also say that the data for Arlington, for Auburn is 18.7 on lack of physical activity, and the data for, click on that, for Arlington is 26 or 25.9. So you can make those kind of statements, but you can't really give a cause, because our data set does not provide that information. So this is when you link. Now why would I care about that? Well, let's go back to the chart in the pivot table, and suppose I wanted to add a couple more cities to my chart. So I did. I added 2 more cities to the chart. Now you see those cities on here. But if I bring my Word document back, you see that it added those other cities. So with a linked chart, a linked document here, when you adjust the original, the other one updates automatically. So that's a really nice feature that you should know about. Now, that's only true if both files have access to each other. They're on the same hard drive or the same folder in the cloud. When you send it to me, I don't have access to your OneDrive, so when I click on it, I'm going to click on it and do Edit Data. And in my case, I can do that because both of these files are on my computer. But in the case of when you send your files in, I won't be able to. If you embed, which was the other option on the Word document, the embedded file, if you double click on the chart or you go to Edit Data, it actually opens the entire Excel file. It includes the Excel workbook as part of the Word file when you do embed, which is one of the first 2 options on your paste. So anyway, that is kind of your walkthrough for this assignment, and I look forward to getting it.